I've recently read True and False Religions by Zwingli and a book about idolatry by William Perkins. Um, you had mentioned some time ago that there were councils before Nicaea that forbid the use of images, icons, etc. And I was curious what those councils are and why there was a change from forbidding to allow it. So I think the Bible is pretty clear.
Well, wow. There's a lot there that
Sorry.
yeah. A lot of folks don't know what icons are, first of all. Um, and the centrality that they hold, especially in Eastern Orthodoxy. Um, just again to give, and because I mentioned this earlier in the program, um, and always keep in mind, whatever council you can quote against a position, all they have to say is it wasn't ecumenical. so, so there were no ecumenical councils before Nicaea. They were all local councils, and therefore they can be disagreed with. So yeah, you did have that type of thing, but it's irrelevant because the seventh ecumenical council is all that matters. Now, does that involve anachronism, an ignoring of history, development? Yeah, it ignores all of it, but that's what you're dealing with. But what people need to understand is this whole concept of authority. Ecumenical councils developed over time. When the first, what is now called ecumenical council, the Council of Nicaea in 325, met, nobody knew what an ecumenical council was. That phrase had no meaning in the Christian church. People weren't sitting around going, oh man, I can't wait till we have our first ecumenical council. It didn't mean anything to anybody. The phraseology came from Constantine, who called it, but all it meant was a council of bishops from across the world. Now, ecumenical council has a specific meaning that grants infallibility, ultimate authority to the actions of that particular council. Nobody in 325 dreamed of that. They didn't have that as a concept. They didn't defend Nicaea on the basis of that. And so it's so easy, and I mentioned this in regards to Joshua Charles last week or the week before. It's so easy for modern people to grab these definitions, put the glasses on the face, and then look back in history and go, oh, it's so clear now. But that wasn't clear at all. And so the issue of icons, I'm not sure exactly, there were early references, yes, but the most important ones is the Seventh Ecumenical Council in 787 is where iconodulia, the service of or veneration of icons, was established as dogma. The problem is that's 787. In 754, you have the Council of Hieria, which said the opposite. That was an iconoclastic council. That council claimed to be ecumenical too. And then after 787, early in the next century, you have a council meeting in Germany, and they take a sort of mediating position. They reject the conclusions of Nicaea II, and they're not as strident as the 754 council, but their arguments are tighter in regards to images in worship and things like that. And so they clearly did not think that the 787 Nicaea II Council, this is the Frankfurt Council, by the way, they certainly didn't think that they had decided the issue. Now, today, Eastern Orthodoxy looks back and says, well, but of course they did. So these other councils, no matter how learned they were or anything else, they're just rejected. And of course, the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Nicaea II, anathematized everybody who had been at the 754 Council. So there's no compromising here amongst these various groups. But the reality is these were not issues in the early church. The the Eastern Orthodox attempt to read um, various texts in such a way as to come up with veneration of icons is honestly in my and we're going to be reviewing one of the books. I think it was published last year or the year before, making this type of argumentation. From my perspective, the argumentation they're using now is so strained and so stretched and so pushed that it is one of the best arguments against the position. If the position had historical validity, you would not have to be making this kind of argumentation. You would not have to be stretching things to the absolute breaking point of language and engaging in the most obvious forms of equivocation. You wouldn't have to be doing that if it was that clear. So I will be obviously expanding on stuff like this as we get more into this type of stuff, starting not necessarily early next year, probably March, April, as my reading and stuff progresses and I'm putting notes together and all that kind of stuff. But it is important, not only if you have Eastern Orthodox friends, relatives, converts, maybe, there's a rush of converts right now that I think, after a while they're going to go, what did I get myself involved with? But if you're talking with people like that, then yeah, this is very, very important. That Seventh Ecumenical Council is considered infallible by both Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox. And therefore, if that council was really nothing more than the exercise of Byzantine state religion, and if it made simply false statements, especially in saying that the creation and veneration of icons was apostolic, which is simply historically untrue, then both systems are fatally wounded in their authority structure at that point. Most people don't understand that. The vast majority of Protestants wouldn't know what an ecumenical council was if we walked up and hit them in the face. So I'm not, there's a lot of people running around saying that I'm trying to protect my brand and expand our cliques. And folks, you look at the stuff I've addressed in my lifetime, and it's been the opposite from the beginning. You want to get a big ministry? Don't be Reformed. You want to be a big ministry? Don't talk about Roman Catholicism. You want to be a big ministry? Don't talk about Islam. What are you talking about? What are you doing? And now here, I'm sitting here going, yeah, and so I'm going to be really putting a whole lot of effort into stuff that most people have never even heard of. Pseudo-Dionysius? What? Greek philosophy 500 years after Christ and angelic realms and this, what? Icons and the Seventh Ecumenical, what are you talking about? Again, I've just made the decision. You do what you need to do to leave the most lasting benefit for the church. And that's not building a empire on Twitter or social media. So, yeah, what can I say? That's the direction we're going, and we'll be doing a whole lot more on icons and what icons are and all that kind of stuff as we get into the new year.